let's talk about soccer. This Fans, Passions, and Brands study with Havas was a global study for us to do here at the lab. And we actually did a mixed methods approach where we created a survey on engagement with a focus on soccer or international football if we're not from the US. That's probably a reason why we're still kind of getting up on the play here as Americans. But we surveyed 21,000 people, and then we actually analyzed 14,000 based on a key question of how interested are you in soccer? Are you somewhat interested, least interested, passionate, most passionate, and then really drilled down on analyzing a lot of the other connections on the interest of soccer. And we did this in 16 countries. And then we also, with IBM, created a Twitter app and gave it to over 6 global offices around Havas to collect 9.6 million tweets during not only the Champions League, but also the World Cup. And then we also went and interviewed people in their homes, at bars, at the World Cup in Rio with 50+ fans that are coded. So it's a huge data set of really studying deeply the international football scene. And everybody that's been on, I want y'all to be able to talk to other people too. This has been a great team. Everyone that actually worked on this raised their hand. So lots of people all at this room that you can definitely talk to. Yeah, I must give a shout out to Pedro, who's here from Rio. Him and his students were a lifesaver. We actually had one-to-one translation where every student came with us as we interviewed all these fans throughout the World Cup. So we really want to thank him there. So let's get to this. So as actually we surveyed and we analyzed the 14,000, what came across is that there were really 6 profiles that started emerging around international football. And I'm going to go through 3 of these to give you a really understanding so you can grasp like how do these like logics of engagement play out in different situations. So a dabbler actually really enjoys watching it, and they will watch it, you know, just kind of for entertainment purposes, unless actually there's something really exciting happening in the game. And then they start paying more attention. So there's this combination of the key logics being about entertainment and immersion. But immersion not in like what I was saying about Harry Potter, where you see the world through that lens, but more an immersion of there's an exciting moment, and in that certain situation, I'm going to be more focused on that property or on that fan. What dabblers don't do is they're not about the logic of advocacy. And the reason why is because they don't really have the logic of mastery as part of their behaviors, because they don't know enough about the sport. So they wouldn't know the statistics, and often they're maybe sitting next to another profile, which we call lover of the game, and going, who's that player? Okay, so we're rooting for which team are we rooting for? So it's good to actually have them connecting to other types of profiles. Now, here's some examples of this. One is Seri Da is one of the players out of the Ivory Coast, and he lost his father right before the game. So these human interest stories are really engaging to dabblers that we interviewed. We found that that was a way to get them more connected to this fanship, in that they would get on and follow the Twitters and the social media of hearing more about Seri and how he was handling this. From my own experience, because I actually default as a dabbler when it comes to international football, it was actually walking around Rio, and Pedro actually showed me this mural on the wall in one of the neighborhoods we were going through. And I would have just walked by and said, oh, look at that, that's nice. That's actually an interesting mural that they've put up for the World Cup. But when you are sitting with someone who's a lover of the game, then you get to understand the story and the nuances behind the images. For example, a lot of Brazilian women, female fans, love Hulky. They call him Hulky, but his name is Hulk. And I loved this because it was kind of a combination of bringing entertainment properties back into sports. And we see this a lot, that a lot of sports fans actually use entertainment references into the sports stories. So you see here Hulk connecting, actually pulling the whole Brazilian team. And someone who probably during the World Cup was not a fan of Hulk kind of ruined that mural. But it gets even... So there's a conversation happening in here, not only if you knew the story of the Brazilian team in relation to Argentina, which is their biggest rival. And so you see Messi over here crying in his chili, you know? But also probably one of those, Argentinian fans saw this mural before I came across it and said, oh, wait a second here. So that actually engages dabblers. Now, when I was at the World Cup, though, even though I default as in the profile of dabbler, like we were talking about, this is agile. This is about changing your mindset as you move from one situational trigger to the other. And the World Cup was a totally different experience that exposed me to more information and buzz. So they had all these. Every sponsor of the World Cup had these big events. We went to Nike. And luckily I have Cristiano Ronaldo here in my back pocket. There you go, just give you a little bit there. But I got to wear his shoes, which was pretty exciting. And I look really sporty here. I mean, it looks like I know how to kick the ball. It's only because Jake is a really good photographer. But then it was connecting with all of the devoted fans. I had Valentina with me from Havas, who's literally, yelling in Italian at any other sport fan. So you knew that she was connected only to one specific nationality and team, did not care about anyone else, where Jake and Bessie were more telling me about all the different sports and teams and going back and forth and saying which is the good games and which are the best players. And then we had lots of different experiences. We actually had the sports events. We got to go to the bars. We got to go to these Nike and Adidas putting on different events. And that moved me into a lover of the game. And that, because I started to know more about it. So lovers of the game is, if you want to speak to a lover of the game, you definitely want to talk to Jake and Bessie. They can tell you anything about soccer. They are fully, totally engaged in the sport. And they're nonpartisan. They are not focused on being just a fan of one team or one nationality, but they can actually appreciate if it's a good play or if he's a really good player. And they know mastery. So they're very much the logic of play and mastery. And one example that I saw with Jake was we bought one of the balls. We were at Parque de Bola, and we bought one of the balls. I have no pictures of this because we all just were so immersed in the experience. But we threw a ball out, and talk about breaking down cultural and language barriers, is all of a sudden we had created a game ourselves in the middle of one of the events, where all these kids started playing with Jake. And Jake will say that he had met his match because they were definitely doing a run for their money. Yeah, they were 9, and we were all just like. What Jake and Bessie are not, though, is they wouldn't actually be what we call guard dogs. They wouldn't argue at the referee or yell at people. They're more about appreciation and the love of the sport. And like I said, they're not very much about identification, the logic of identification, where you really kind of tie to one. Now, there's one other switch that I'd like to share with you about moving from a lover of the game, which was in certain types of contexts, to actually a situational trigger that moved me to a mascot. And that is a mascot is partisan. We focus on kind of our own nationality. And I had, before going to the World Cup, had spent a lot of time with the Real Madrid club here in Los Angeles. So if you don't know soccer, Cristiano Ronaldo is the key player for Real Madrid. And I hung around with a lot of female sports fans who would gaga goots over Cristiano Ronaldo. And so they were all like, go and see him, you've got to do that, everything. So I even had a Cristiano Ronaldo t-shirt on. So more as kind of a dabbler or lover of the game, I go to the USA-Portugal game. If you recall this was a really incredible game because in the last second, Portugal won, right? And I had on my Cristiano Ronaldo t-shirt with a USA sweatshirt over it. Because I was going for both of them. I didn't mind anything. Okay, it was so hot that day. We were in a Brazilian bar where all the waiters and waitresses spoke Spanish, which really confused all my Brazilian friends because it's Portuguese language, right? And other than the waiters and waitresses and our Brazilian friends, everyone else in the bar were American. And nonstop, you heard this chant over and over again. I believe, I believe, I believe that we can win, okay? It was so hot, I would have never taken off my sweatshirt. I was clearly a mascot during this moment because there were stronger ties to having national pride. The pride was about socializing with devoted fans. It was really interesting. I was sitting at a table. You just were squeezing yourself in next to someone who worked from Disney and came down to actually the World Cup. So we were having conversations of the difference between Disney fans and soccer fans through this experience. And it immersed you in the environment, and you were caught up in the moment of this notion of the logic of pride, which is between, I think, identification and advocacy. That pride is where you can really be proud and actually want to support and love the team that's there. Whether you know them or not, it becomes kind of a moment. And we were very proud of Tim Howard. If you remember, he saved the day multiple times. And here's another reference of, you shall not pass when it comes to Tim Howard. And a reference of Lord of the Rings, which ties entertainment and sports again to connected. Now, I want to talk one more thing about entertainment and sports. The interesting thing, we always ask the soccer fans what their favorite entertainment properties were. And 9 out of 10 times, it was Game of Thrones, 24, and when you started asking, well, why do you think this is your fourth? Because they have Game of Thrones is like this World Cup. There are all these different houses, right, and teams. So there's a connection there between being able to be loyal or partisan to a specific group. And then when it comes to 24, it's the adrenaline rush. The adrenaline rush of sports in relation to the adrenaline rush of some of these fast, action-paced dramas that we see in entertainment. And so there's a lot of interesting connections we can think about as we develop content and we understand these different social groups more, that knowing that, you can actually build upon it and create new types of strategies. This is a great story on a mascot. Someone said the other day, I think Sam, you were like, who has time, or Ed, who has time to actually spend all their time at the World Cup? Well, Teddy Golzevelt definitely spent the whole entire time at the World Cup. And this is a fan that was very much a mascot. He was all about US. He was partisan to that team. He was always outward facing, thinking about the American persona as he represented it. He held pep rallies ahead of different games to actually engage fans. And this wasn't sponsor or brand related. This is a fan just building upon that, building upon what they loved, to the point where Will Ferrell and the American players started tweeting about him, and Will Ferrell said, oh my gosh, I got to go hang out with this guy. And there's lots of video of Teddy and Will doing some stand-up comedy going on down in Rio. So something to check out. So what can you do with all this information? Here I've shown you different profiles that play out in international football, and we want you to really think about these 8 logics. Do you see them in when you talk about your own fanship? Do you see actually some of the logics or behaviors that you kind of gravitate to or define who you are as a fan? But the other thing is once you've collected it, are there ways that we can actually start strategizing and making fans more about a relationship with the media and entertainment system? Not thinking about them as just a consumer or actually that they're a dollar sign, but that they have a value to the media and entertainment of actually being more part of the conversation on how things are shaped and what they want and what they don't want. Imagine the leveraging engagement model in news, or in unscripted entertainment, in original programming, in fine arts. Can you see in the fan properties or the fan characters or teams or Star Trek or name it? Can you actually see how these behaviors help you to identify that every fan, one size doesn't fit all? that there are many different types of fan groups that engage with a specific player, a specific team, a specific sport, entertainment property, and so on. So I'll leave it as what one of you back there said about Star Trek. Let's make it so today. Thanks.